Welcome, welcome, everybody to Deconstructive Fun Podcast. My guest today is Rina Onar. Rina, welcome
Oh,
to the podcast.
thank you for having me, Mishka.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. I think I invited you for the first time maybe a year and a half ago or two.
I just, yeah, that put me on the spot. It took me a while to get back to you, but
it's
I'm glad
it's
I'm
been
here today.
it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. People are waiting to hear from you. It's like not the everyday we get to talk to such a successful founder as yourself. I mean, Peak Games. Actually, can I do the introduction for you?
Please do.
All right. Rina Onar, CEO and co-founder of Spyke Games, a game studio that was established in 2020. As of today, you have nearly 60 people and have done a lot of hiring in 2023. Um, about Spike Games, before we talk more about you as a very accomplished person. So, two games from Spike Games. You got Royal Riches, launched in 2021. It's a take on Coin Master. I think it's on autopilot based on the data that I'm seeing. You tried, it didn't scale. You move to the next one, and you move to Tilebusters. Now, Tilebusters launched in 2022 at the same time as you were putting this one in autopilot, according to the data. A lot of scaling up as of late, with revenues continuing to grow, even as you've decreased downloads. It's a real hockey stick curve. A Finn would know what that looks like. And another point is that you've raised a monster seed round. Like, I don't think anybody has raised seed rounds like these. I can't even name a game company that would. It would have to be like a what crypto company at the height of all this, not scamliness, height of
I know,
all
I
the
don't want to be that
excitement.
hot.
At the height of all the excitement, 55 million seed round from Griffin Gaming Partners. And according to my math, what do I know? Puts you at a valuation of 200 or something at that point. And somebody who would be reading it like, this makes no sense. And then they would be like, who's the CEO of this company that raised 55 million pre-seed from such a good investor? And then like, oh, Rina, co-founder of Peak Games. You were there for 13 years, exited at 1.8 billion valuation to Zynga. And you're also a general partner at 500 Istanbul. It's a microfund focused on Turkic region and the Turkish diaspora. So you have quite the background. Rina, what did I miss?
I think you did a better job than I could do about myself. Thank you for that intro. But yeah, I mean, I've had a weird career of like doing kind of 360s. I started out as an investor, then turned into entrepreneur. We got so lucky. We stuck with Peak for a long time, as you said. It was such a successful exit, such a successful platform and company for Turkey, for gaming in general, for our part of the world. And then I did try investing again with early stage tech companies, but I think operating called back to me. And I still felt, I had the energy and I had access to an incredible team we wanted to build. So, at the end of 2020, we kind of got together and built Spike Games again. So I'm back to
Yeah.
operating and building, which truly gives me joy. And I feel that is the purpose of my life. In addition to kind of raising my daughter, a 5-year-old wonderful girl, the best girl in the world. She's so patient with me. Who's, as a mom who's not super present, as you can imagine, with your
Uh-huh.
girls. But yeah, that's in a nutshell me.
Well, as we were starting this in the pre-recording session, you were talking about how busy you are and how you don't have time to work out, and it's all about work and family life. So my question is like, why? Like, why are you doing this all over again?
That's a
You
good
were the
question.
co-founder and CEO of Peak. You founded your own venture capital that clearly has an amazing niche since Turkey is blowing up in the most positive sense. Um, what drives you to do this all over again and get on this grind mobile that is known as startup life?
True. I mean, that's a fantastic question. And also something I took very seriously. So before we built Spike, we had this family discussion. I think all of the co-founders had this family discussion saying
Mhm.
that we're all walking away from really comfortable, really secure, really well-deserved careers at Peak and whatnot to go back into the pit and burn ourselves willingly. So are we ready to do that? And do
Mhm.
we understand what that entails on our lives, our families' lives, everything else? So I think the short answer of why I personally decided to do it and step into the role of CEO this time is is simply because I can, and maybe slightly because it was my turn this time. And I'm not seeing the latter, especially in the glamorous sense. It's not like, oh, I'm like the CEO now.
Yeah.
It is the shit job, to be honest with you. I think it is this glamorized, horrible job where your responsibility is to deal with the problems that nobody else wants to deal with and nobody else potentially could also deal with. It's your job to create this platform, this environment, and manage the resources so all of these other cool people can do what they came here to do, which is build and scale and grow these amazing games. So in my old role with Peak, I was one of the lucky ones where I could focus on the product and the investor relations and the strategy and all of the fun side of things. And Siddhar was kind of dealing with everything else, this nebulous concept of being the CEO. And having gone through all of the things that we did go through with starting up and scaling and then separations and everything, I think put me in this unique position of where I could take that responsibility. And all of those people who helped us do the fantastic things at Peak now could take a bigger responsibility, bigger role of leading these departments. So it kind of organically came together. I mean, the idea of when we organically talked about, yeah, we're still young, we can still do something. Why not give our energy in doing something impactful and creative and not just be a figure on somebody else's balance sheet anymore? So when we actually decided to pull the trigger, it kind of made sense that, I put myself in this horrible position.
Damn, when you could have just moved to, I don't know, Marmaris and just enjoyed
I know, right? Right?
the
So
sea
in
life and the
hindsight,
investment life.
looks like such a good idea.
Yeah, hindsight. So talk to me a little about, so you said you were on the product side and now you're being on the CEO side. From my own perspective, the way it goes is like you're responsible for everything except the good stuff. The good stuff is always achieved by the product team, and the bad stuff is achieved by CEO, who creates the wrong type of culture, makes wrong type of deals.
True.
So how does this transition has gone, and do you miss the product side?
Well, gladly. I mean, I think the positive thing is that I'm not so far removed from the product side or the UA side or the data. I'm still as involved as I can be as time permits. Coming from gaming, it is impossible to kind of stop that. And we don't want to have this monolithic culture of somebody or some person decides everything. So we've built this with 5 co-founders. And the beauty of that is each co-founder, so like if everybody else left, the 5 of us would be able to, like, it would be slow, but we would be able to crank out a game. So that is in itself is such a strong proposition to begin with. Like if we had no money, no team, nobody that followed us, we would work a lot more and it would take us longer, but we would get a product out. So that is in itself very beautiful. And the way that we work is we try to complement each other and we believe in diversity of ideas. So when we're giving product decisions or trying to decide which new genre or subgenre or product we go into, it's not just like the CPO that kind of goes out and says, we should do this. So I am very much involved. And the second thing about what I have to do or, what I need to ensure that Spyke succeeds and thrives and goes everywhere we want it to go to is we have to be really conscious in some of the decisions that we make because we keep talking about culture. Culture is literally nothing. Culture is a composition of the people the company is comprised of. So culture is defined with every new person you bring in through these doors, from the most junior to the most senior. And if you're not really protective of that with every new person that comes in, it kind of quickly slips away, no matter how much you write about it on your blog or in your manifesto or whatnot. So I think the best thing I can do is be really cognizant of the type of people that we bring in and how we treat them after we bring them in. So that is my number one priority.
How do you enforce those policies? Like, meaning, they go on like, let's say you hire an animator on a by the way, Tile Busters, I'm kind of hooked. I was like, I'm not a big match player. I'm like, all right, tile blasting game. Like I've never seen any of those before. It's a very interesting take. If people haven't tried it, go ahead. It's a good one.
Try it.
It's quite hooking.
Yeah.
My expectations were zero. Like, I mean, not zero, but like, I'm not a match player. Let's be honest. I don't play green games and those games. This one is fun. This was fun. I played it actually with my daughter. Anyway, how do you with the culture? Let's say somebody that came to my mind because like an animator goes in and works on tile blasters. How do you ensure that person is correctly or like how do I put it, like in down into the culture that you have in your company when you're not even on that game team?
Sure. So it is the most difficult thing to balance. I think it is one of my biggest challenges because a startup, as it's growing fast, like we are, everything is urgent. Everybody's overworked. Everybody
Hmm.
needs new additions to their team. And you're under this pressure to keep growing, 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 which comes with a side dish of growing your team at the same time. But if we lose sight of that and we grow too fast without being really critical of the type of people that we're bringing in, you look back and you've hired, you've made like 60% wrong hires, which is going to
Hmm.
have a bigger impact of just saying goodbye to a number of people. After those people leave, there's going to be an impact, like a scar tissue that's left in the company. So regardless of the pressures that we have in trying to grow our team, we still try to have these processes in place where people are going through multiple checks and talks, and they meet various different people within the team, not only from their department, but like tangential departments they might be working with
Hmm.
potentially. And for us, when we're getting somebody, 50% of the decision is obviously technical or like skill based, but I'm going to say like almost like the other 50% is about culture and attitude. Whether these people are coming in with low egos, eager to learn, accepting the fact that we're going to make a lot of mistakes, but we're going to have to keep learning from them and work together. So if that isn't there, even if we're finding the best engineer you can find, we won't get them into our team. We'll maybe try to look for a way to work with them, maybe like on a project basis or something, but we're not going to bring them in. Is our number one policy. So that's why we're 60 people. We're not envisioning that we're going to be
Hmm.
thousands of people. At a maximum, we're going to be probably 100 to 100, right? That's what like peak size was. So I envision us landing there. So
Hmm.
that's the advantage. We don't need thousands of people. We don't need like just like people manning these products.
Yeah.
We like working with compact teams, so we can be really selective in the types of people that we choose to work with.
Got it. And are there some characteristics or traits or values for the people you hire that you've verbalized? Or like, how do you make that call other than like, oh, it was great having a lunch with this person and we really jive? Like, that's usually could be a false flag as well.
Yeah,
Or
that's. I mean, obviously, if you like the people that you work with
Mhm.
on a friends level, that's fine. But that's not the number one requirement.
Mhm.
It's not like we're trying to build this bro culture. I think the difference in how we're doing it now versus how we probably did in Peak is very different. When I co-founded Peak, I was 24 years old. Was
Mhm.
my first kind of real foray into building anything, and I hadn't managed anybody. Maybe I wasn't even managed properly myself because I was in the workforce for so little before I, said,
Yeah.
"Fuck this! I'm going to build my own thing." So we were learning everything on the job and not necessarily doing a great, doing all the rights.
No.
So this time around, with all of the mistakes that we've done, I think we're very aware and very cognizant of the type of people we are and the type of people we want to work with. And if
Mhm.
I say one thing about Spyke that's different than a lot of the gaming studios out there, or maybe from our past endeavors, is that there's a really high grown-up energy here. It's maybe because the co-founders were older compared to what you would
Mhm.
expect of a typical gaming founder, which is like the 24 to 27-year-old
Yeah.
male
Yeah.
hardcore gamer. So it's very different. It's led by a woman CEO, myself, who's been in gaming for more than like 12 years. Mother, so has learned to be very patient and resilient and understanding and accommodating at the same time, but also very grown up, right? So we've done this before. We're not saying we know everything, but we have a
Mhm.
level of know-how and experience that you can't deny. So
Yeah.
everything we do, we want to put on top of that, and we want to work with people who look at this professionally, no feelings aside, just data driven, and looking at this as a career, right? So I really dislike the extravagant, lavish sayings like, "Oh, we're a family." Like this is like, well, like this is not nobody's family. Everybody has a family. This is our job, and we're here to do the best possible damn job that we can. So if you want to work with people who are very driven, who are
Mhm.
very goal oriented and ambitious and hungry like
Mhm.
us, which you can tell, then be here because you're going to be surrounded with people like that and they're going to lift you up. We'll all lift each other up and be better by the end of it.
Yeah. Love it. And how many are you? All of your co-founders former Peak?
Yeah, except one who's Mitat. He's one of my best childhood friends. He worked
Yeah.
with Riot Games in Santa Monica for
Yeah.
7 years, I want to say. And we tried to recruit him to Peak many, many times, but he said, "Oh, I'm not coming back to Turkey." Then he fell in love with a Turkish girl, came back home, got married. So that's when we snatched him up. But he's the only
Nice.
one who's not ex-peak. Yeah, but
And
cool story, full cycle.
but you know him really, really well. I mean, the
Yeah.
childhood
He's
friend.
like
So
from childhood friends, exactly. And
that
he's been in gaming, so it's not
yeah.
like a friend relationship,
Yeah.
but he's been in gaming.
I was just going for it's like how gelled is the founding team on these values? It seems like very much
Oh,
because same
very, very
company or
much.
childhood friend
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and the
Everybody
second
ex-peak besides men. Yeah.
okay, so that's one big plus. I've seen that before and or even experienced it and everybody's in Istanbul.
Everybody's in a slum. So I think that's the only weird thing about us in
Yeah.
today's world, where especially post-COVID, everybody's pushed through working like decentralized, distributed
Hmm.
teams. For us, we are very old school in that we
Hmm.
all work together from the office from Istanbul.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that we chose to do that was no, it's. I believe our team is rock stars, like filled
Hmm.
with rock stars. But I think even rock stars, if they haven't worked in the same studio on the same product
Hmm.
for the past X years, need some time to get back into the groove of
Hmm.
working well with each other together on the same product, right? So not only the co-founding team, but our initial engineers, product people, artists, they were all ex-colleagues from Peak, right? But from various different products and various
Hmm.
different studios. We've had past of working together on this project and that, but the last, I don't know, 2 years weren't spent on working day and
Yeah.
night, 24/7 on the same product. So we needed time to kind of get back into the groove of understanding each other, communicating with each other, and building on the same thing. And that's easily achieved when you work together side by
Hmm.
side, especially in a product as multidisciplinary as gaming, where engineers, product people, artists, animators have to work together. So it was just convenient and
Hmm.
we leaned into it. So I think in the foreseeable future, we're going to
Yeah.
continue this way, but who knows?
Don't be apologetic. You're just going for a proven model.
Yeah,
People working together on to building something new, and avoiding all kinds of issues with miscommunication and
true.
misunderstanding and just misalignment by having everybody in the same office. In addition to actually hiring people who you've worked with before, so you're really doubling down on it, and you're preaching to the choir. I don't have to explain to others that I've seen all the sides of it, and I'm very much a believer in a on-site slash hybrid model, just
Yeah,
with new product development, especially with the synchronous work.
true.
And most of the team, if not all the team, is Turkish, correct?
Yes, most. I mean, we have. So Istanbul is this really cosmopolitan place where, especially a few years ago, more, I think we
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of inflowing talent from Eastern
Yeah.
Europe and
Yeah.
Russia and also the Middle East. That still continues to be the case because we're in this effed up region where
Yeah.
conflict never ceases to end. So
Yeah.
there's always people who are sadly displaced from their homes, and especially for gaming, Turkey, Istanbul is a place where you could opportunistically consider, especially if you're from this part of the world. So
Yeah.
we have some expats that have relocated here,
Hmm.
not necessarily for us, but for just being a part of the gaming ecosystem. But majority is Turkish.
Yeah. So culturally homogenous, I would say. Would
Yes,
that
I
be
think so.
correct?
I would say.
Ah,
Except I think we're more. I mean, still, female representation is a problem
yeah.
in us, in gaming, in tech.
Yeah.
So currently the team is around 30% female, which is
Yeah.
high compared to industry standards. It's not where we need it to
But
be, but yeah,
my stance on that is not stance. My understanding of that is if you're a large company with a lot of people that you're employing, diversity is a very important aspect. If you're a startup with tens of employees, if you start playing the diversity game, you're not big enough. It's not.
true,
First of all, you will not have an impact, maybe on a long
true,
term. But secondly, you will have an impact on your ability to scale and hire the right type of people.
true,
If you start creating these different handicaps to play with whoever is employing
true,
100,000, like it's just a
true.
different scale. It doesn't mean that something is
Yeah.
more important or less. It's just like you have to make a great product to one day grow to that scale where that can become a target for you to optimize against. Still,
Yeah.
so just but
True.
yeah, yeah, and then again, like this is very interesting because there's a lot of things that make your team a very well-oiled machine, and you can see this in a way how you quickly pivot to another product, how quickly you launch, how quickly you scale, and a lot of it comes from having worked together for a long time, really having that trust in your leadership team, having a homogenous team and having an on-site team and pretty much the same language, like all these things that
Yeah.
people don't like to maybe emphasize enough, but these are very important when you're giving a birth to a company and to a set of products. So very interesting. That leads to my question. It's a very long one, long-winded. How different are you from other Turkish studios in Istanbul?
I think, I mean, I'm sure there are commonalities and similarities, because at the end of the day, it is a small ecosystem. I think
Hmm.
the impact that it creates is fantastic and large in volume and scale, but there are only, like, I don't know, like thousands of people working in the industry, I
Hmm.
think. So we follow the model that we, I think, started and perfected at Peak because that's what we're familiar with. That's where we're all coming from. So we work in, game specific, game oriented, game focused squads and studios or whatever you want to call them, where each group, each squad is an independent, well-oiled machine working on
Hmm.
their own with a high level of ownership, and initiative taking abilities and autonomy, basically. So it constitutes of like engineering, product, different sets of artists and animators. And then closer to launch, we have like a dedicated workforce coming from our user acquisition and data teams to kind of set up all the systems
Hmm.
and get
Hmm.
them ready for launch and testing and whatnot. Because testing and split testing and optimization is a continuous process in our development mentality. So I think the way we're different maybe is we optimize for speed, but we also optimize for quality and data driven decision making, right? We never ever put anything into the game without thoroughly testing it, even if it's gonna delay us for another 2 to 3 weeks, because as you wait for the results and you make decisions based on that, it kind of puts a continuous lag on your cycle. But we still live by the rule. We would never do anything without testing
Yeah.
thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly. So maybe that's what's different. And the second thing that might be different is we are huge believers in spending a lot of time into the first product that we build, regardless of what the commercial success of that's going to be. But we invest so heavily because that's the main infrastructure, especially in the tech side, that we
Hmm.
set and the standard and the tools that we set for every other game that we're going to build. So to give you a perspective, Royal Riches, which wasn't a commercial success like Tilebusters is or will continue to be, took us about, I don't know, like 10 to 11 months to get to
Hmm.
MVP because we did that heavy lifting of investing into our libraries, our own platform, our own infrastructure in an incredibly modular way. And because of that, on the back of that tech investment that we did, Tilebusters took us like 2 months, 2.5 months to
Wow.
MVP. And
Wow.
that's why we scaled it so fast, because we kept adding live ops and testing and optimizations and new content through that infrastructure that we built very, very quickly. So we started testing beginning of 2023. It's been like 7 months in full and it's going
Hmm.
gangbusters, and hopefully we'll continue to grow because of that. So maybe that's what we do differently, because a lot of people were thinking about like, why are they taking so long to ship
Yeah.
something? That was why.
That's not
Yeah.
long. I didn't take you long, but it's clearly that the second game came super fast. So it
Yeah.
took it took you the normal amount of time, but you actually built a whole platform that you can build more
Yeah.
games on. So that's one part. Let me ask some question that I know about Turkish companies that are
Yeah.
typical. Let's see if you're the same. Like your approach is a little bit different. Let me ask about ways of working. Do you do any co-development?
No.
Exactly. Also very typical of Turkish companies, and that also leads to a certain type of game genres that the Turkish companies are extremely good at, and limits some other ones. For somewhat reason, companies from Istanbul are not doing co-development and not some outsourcing for sure. Do you do that even? Like no,
Not
maybe.
even. I mean, not
No.
at significant levels to speed up.
Yeah.
But once like the visual style and the visual, like it's set.
Yeah.
Maybe to ramp up production,
Yeah.
commoditize production, but not even
Yeah.
not too much.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm talked to other companies. Like, let's say if you'd be in Tel Aviv, like the moment you get any funding, there's another studio popped up.
Everything's in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's another studio like with 30 people right away. Let's go to the moon. So that's a
True.
different
True.
approach. You let me ask another question that most likely you have. You have probably compared to the general public and general industry as well, very high salaries, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think now, especially given that Istanbul has become this
Hmm.
hotbed of
Yeah.
talent and companies, it's not only local competition that's propping
Hmm.
up that's like after the same type of talent, but it's also international people,
Yeah.
like international companies, because of like distributed work streams and working
Yeah.
remotely. So to be able to, I mean, obviously we want to build the best environment so that people want to
Hmm.
stay here, and comp is a big like component of that, besides your
Yeah.
mission and your culture and all of that. So we have to compete at the international level.
Hmm.
And we've been lucky enough that we can do it because we did raise that monster round, like
Yeah.
some of which went to this purpose,
Of course.
obviously. So yes, gaming in general is higher standard compared to like Turkish like, general public.
Hmm.
And I think the top performing gaming companies are close to like global, like especially European levels of comp.
Yeah, yeah, but again, it's like something that people have misconceptions, maybe consider it
Yeah, people
like
think
a
it's cheap
cheaper
labor here.
location.
It's
Yes,
not.
it's
The
not.
cheap
It's
labor that you get access to isn't probably as high quality as you wish it to be. The
yeah,
really top-notch, high-quality people,
yeah.
they're getting paid the same level as
Mhm.
somebody in London.
Yeah, it's not typical even in European countries. So let me just put it that
No,
way. But Turkey is known, or Istanbul is known to pay really really good salaries for professionals because you have smaller teams as well compared to European developers.
true,
And another
true.
thing that I in addition to everything that you've said, working on site, culturally homogenous, so forth. So very typical for Turkish studios. Final one, long hours on site.
Yeah, I think that's different for us.
No,
That was one of the conscious decisions that we did, and like maybe a byproduct of this grown-up culture
no.
that I told you about. So I've
Hmm.
seen at Peak, like working people to the bone and
Yeah.
you know the long hours, the 24/7s, no vacations, no holidays, none of that. And it was necessary back then. And I'm not being apologetic about it, but as I
No.
said, when we started, nobody knew anything about gaming, including us. So we
Yeah.
were learning on the job. So trying to learn and do at the same time, there weren't enough hours in the day to kind of do all of that in the scale and the speed that we wanted to do. But that kind of stuck, right? It's like it kind of became part of the culture and it continued even after the exit
Yeah.
and scale, all of that. So I think a lot of the companies that came out of Peak kind of embodied that because that was the only way they saw,
Hmm.
like that was the only way to be successful in their
Yeah.
mindset. Like you have to work yourself to the bone. But what you do that, I think as a co-founder, you can do that because this is your baby. You're well
Yeah.
incentivized to kind of see the end of it, and you give from your life and you sacrifice a lot. That's part of the job. But that's not necessarily a part of the job for everybody else you kind of bring on afterwards. And no matter how well you incentivize them, either through options or comp and
Hmm.
whatnot,
Hmm.
it's at the end of the day not their baby like it is yours.
Yeah.
So I think sustainability for us was more important than getting the most out of people in the next 6 to 12 months, which would happen if you keep, you know, pushing this on
Yeah.
people. And back in the day, Peak was the only place that people could work at. So
Yeah.
you could say, take it or leave it. But
Yeah.
now there's so many other companies that people could choose to go to. So we have to build this environment where people choose to want to work with us. They are happy to work here. They think it's sustainable. And they, at the end of the day, also within that working parameter,
Hmm.
also bring out commercially successful games that they feel proud of. If you can manage to do that, that's golden. So that's what
Yeah.
we set out to do. And I think with Tilebusters, we're now showing that working like this is possible and it
Yeah.
can lead to commercial success, like stuff that you can feel proud of. But for that, you have to be really disciplined, really focused, like a maniac during the hours you work in. So you're not going to be seeing like ping pong matches or
Yeah.
FIFA like during working hours here. And it's not a set rule. It's just people choose to do that to meet their deadlines and also get out of here at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly. There's not the stuff that happened when you were 20. You didn't have
yeah,
anything to go to home, so you might just as well stay at the
true,
office
true.
and have some fun and so forth, and let the cleaning ladies do their work in the middle of the night after you've been at the office
Exactly.
ransacked it. But I didn't mean it in a bad way. Like it's I've worked with enough Turks and and see talked to enough with the studios. The people in Istanbul work hard. They get
Yeah.
incentivized for it. They get paid really well, but I haven't heard about the same type of trends that would be happening in Western Europe, where you'd be people
Yeah.
asking for like, I need to work from home. How about
No.
4 day work week? How can we work less from more remote positions?
True.
It seems like you're in very traditional in the sense everybody comes to the office. We're
Yeah.
not kids anymore. We're going to focus. We're going to get our work done, whether it takes 8 hours or 10
Yeah.
hours. We're not going to work 14 hours anymore, but we're going to work
True.
effectively
True.
and get back home to, and if
True.
need be, we will work longer hours.
Yeah. To
Um,
be clear, yeah, there are days that we work 14 hours because this is a startup and
no,
things break, right? So when that happens, it's not like we're like
no,
public officials where, oh, clockwork, like we got to get out of here. It's not like that. But it is
no.
just, we don't stay here for the sake of staying here. Like
Yes,
we stay here if there's something to do and there's energy to be given or something to be getting out of that,
yeah,
like additional hour spent. So that's the
yeah.
difference, I think.
Love it. I mean, it's very basic. It's like you're not stupid, you're smart, but you work hard. It's not
Yeah.
so that's
Hopefully.
the way
I
it
mean,
is.
that's the hope.
Yeah, well, you can see it. You can see it in the numbers and the velocity of how you pivot and how you scale games. Like it's moving really fast. Um, let's talk a little bit about the products that you have. So, first
Mhm.
game, challenging, the first game, Royal Riches, meaning
Yeah.
challenging Moon Active, and then the second one, it's kind of like like going towards the route of Dream. There's a little bit of I can see that in the graphics a little bit. Definitely with a tile blasting peak, but it's novel. It's very novel. Like
Yeah.
people should download Tile Busters and see for themselves. I've never played anything quite like this, and it's very easy, but you get hooked to it. It's a
Mm.
very interesting thing. Um, how did you choose these genres? Like how what led to these decisions?
I think it was a combination of understanding what we were good at, like
Hmm.
from what we worked before, and also trying to find an opportunity, right? Because if you're the 1,000th
Yeah.
gaming company out there doing another match three or blasting, you either have to bring something amazing to the table combined with an incredible war chest of UA spend ability, or you should just forget about it, right? It's going to be so difficult to be heard and be seen in that noisy, extremely competitive, extremely overcrowded environment, right? So I think like trying to do a knockoff of like Coin Master came from that because back in peak, we were good at two things. One of them like multiplayer synchronous games, like card games, board games, tabletop games that was acquired by Zynga initially in 2017. And the second thing was like this widely accessible puzzle genre, aka blasting, like the blast titles that we were really good at. So we said, why don't we combine? Like, why don't we build these really casual but social games? And Coin Master was like a great example of that with the PvP aspect and not requiring any skill, not much at least. So we went into that with the bravado, saying that what, when we first did Toy Blast, when we did the blasting, we weren't the first ones creating that genre, but we figured it out. We did it
Hmm.
better than
Hmm.
everybody. So I think we came to the table with that bravado, with that ego of, we're smart, we'll figure it out. But lo and behold, like coming in that late to a subgenre or an industry like social casino that is so far advanced with so much built-in knowledge and experience and know-how, especially post IDFA, it was crazy, right? So it was very evident to us as soon as we launched, like soon after that,
Hmm.
we could make it better and we could grow it, but it would never get to the scale or the targets that we wanted to get to in a sustainable fashion, right? I guess if you throw enough money at a problem, you could get it somewhere, but we weren't willing to go down that route. So at that point, as you said, we took a reset and we said, okay, we built this tech, we built this incredible platform where it's very modular and we can take one core out and put in another. What do? We understand level-based, lightly skill-based puzzle genre. And when you think of puzzle, it's very natural for people to immediately think about Match 3 or
Hmm.
Blast.
Hmm.
But there's so many other things that weren't as popular before incredible companies came out, build a product that touched millions and changed everything and crafted a space for that subgenre. So as we started looking, I mean, we got pretty hooked around like the tile matching, Mahjong meets, some things that we did back at Peak.
Hmm.
And we said, why don't we bring this from that and this from that project? And like the entire visual style, that comes from Peak of being so like inspired by Disney and Pixar.
Yeah.
So why don't we do all of that and bring it into this like lightly skill-based deterministic puzzle that's kind of very different than Blast and Match 3 because they embody like a level of skill, but also a huge level of luck when you're solving. But ours is like, it's a deterministic puzzle. It's more similar to solitaire than a
Hmm.
Match 3 almost. So it kind of like started out this experiment. We definitely, like, in all honesty, this is not like
Yeah.
we had this great vision and we knew it was going to work. It started out as an experiment, and as I said,
Yeah.
experiments are very easy for us to churn out now because of the platform. So we said, well, we'll just give it a try. And then we saw the numbers and we're like, okay, we're onto something. Let's stop everything else and focus on this and see if it responds to everything we add to it. And it did. So we shifted our entire focus to Tile Busters.
So you said you shifted the focus after you saw the numbers, and like, what is
Yes, yes,
your process of seeing the like? How soon do you put the game out,
yes,
and like, what do you use to validate your gut feeling that this could be really fun?
yes. So Tile Busters was really fast
Hmm.
to MVP because of the engine. So
Mm.
we had only like 2 engineers working on it to kind of like repurpose what we had built with Royal Riches. And because it was an experiment, we didn't even like re-envision a narrative, a story, or a meta. We just took the meta we built for Royal Riches and just
Yeah.
like it repurposed everything. Like
Yeah.
also the art assets and the visual style. We obviously like switched the entire user onboarding and UI UX, all of that. But like in its core, it was very similar to Royal Riches. So we just like spun it out in I think 2 months, started doing some initial plague testing, and the data around like retention curves, like CPIs, in addition to that ROAS, and even monetization looked very promising
Hmm.
for a novel puzzle game. I mean, you expect good retention rates, like
Yeah.
stickiness from a puzzle game, but in the beginning, you don't expect good monetization. And I think the monetization of Tile Busters was especially strong because we had spent all that time in trying to monetize a social casino title. And we were doing all sorts of segmentation and personalization and dynamic pricing and associated live ops to a casino title that
Yeah.
required no skill. So that was the only thing we did. And by only taking a fraction of that and testing it on a puzzle game was a game changer, right? Like early, like without doing anything, early
Hmm.
monetization metrics was closer to what we were seeing at peak with Toy Blast back in the day. So we're like, whoa, like this is before we added anything to it.
Yeah.
So that's what gave us the hope to continue. And as we continued, and we said, oh, maybe it's the golden cohorts. Like let's see if it's still going to sustain, and it did. So
Yeah.
that's when, both in terms of human resource and
Hmm.
like financial resources, we tried to divert our energy to Tile Busters and make it as big as it can be and create this forever franchise that can give birth to potentially other puzzle titles.
Yeah, you're describing a wet dream of social casino company. Like what? It's like they've been trying to do this for what, 5 years
I
now. What do you think they can't do this? Like why? They're
But probably why it's the same reason why we couldn't do a
yeah,
social casino title,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like they're completely different animals. If you ask me why Royal Riches
Mhm.
didn't commercially work, I probably have answers, but I'm not sure they're the right ones, because if they
Yeah,
were the right ones, we would go back and fix them and it would work. So I just don't even think I completely understand the genre, to be honest with you,
yeah.
or what drives the audience and how to get the best out of it. So I think it might be the same. It's a completely different audience. The strategy of putting new content out to them is different. The strategy of trying to get them to your game is different. It's this inherent knowledge and know-how we've built over the years when there wasn't this competition, right? When we put out Toy Blast, there weren't like 1,000 other puzzle games out there, so we were competing with ourselves,
Mm.
not with anybody else, and we were kind of learning and gaining market share while doing that. So it's a kind of result of all of those years of working in the genre.
It's an interesting kind of like a learning case because I've been following the Moon Actives, the Playtikas, and they have all this monetization expertise that on paper you would assume that once you give it to a casual gaming company, they would just take it and run with it and create what kind of you've been able to create. But I think what they're missing is this part is like you have to actually like
Have a
walk.
game that works.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
no,
Have
no.
a
It's like
yeah.
a walk a mile in the social casino company shoes to really understand the learnings that they're sharing. It's not just enough to read about these different monetization tactics or books or however they share
Yeah.
this information. But if the puzzle team actually tries to build a social casino or a casual casino game, uh, learns a lot from it, and then goes back to their root of what they're really good at, which is puzzle, then that could be the right way. I don't, this is a hypothesis. So Playtika, don't try this. But, so, Anyways, how do you? But what's interesting, like, how do you take the learnings from an old game to a new one, and then reach that sort of a what you've described a continuous development loop? Like, what's that
Yeah.
process?
I think it is one of the challenges that like ex-peak teams
Hmm.
probably are dealing with and battling with, like we are, because obviously it's an incredible luxury and incredible like competitive advantage of having that
Hmm.
know-how and thinking, oh, this is what we did there with that product, like and it's worked. But at the same time, I think you have to remember that some of that information is very old. Like
Hmm.
Toon Blast is like what 5, 6 years old now. It's and the entire landscape has changed tremendously in that period. So if
Yeah.
Toon Blast came out today, as it is now, with all its bells and whistles, it, I guarantee you it wouldn't reach the place that it is currently. Like it wouldn't be able to compete with itself, right? So
No.
because the market is so different. So I think it is very important. I mean, I think we're so grateful and we should be so appreciative of all of that experience and know-how that all of these teams gained on somebody else's dime, like with past investors and whatnot. But I think it's also important to realize that the world is very different. And when you come out now, back in the day, we always prided ourselves oddly saying that, oh, we're not the biggest creators, we're not the biggest
Yeah.
inventors, oh, we're not Supercell, but we're incredible executioners. We'll take one like a genre and like spin out the best product you've ever played in
Hmm.
that subgenre is what we prided ourselves in. I think back then it was enough. If
Yeah.
you like all of a sudden we weren't the first blast game. Diamond Dash and many like others were the first blast games.
Yeah.
We just did it really well. So we took market share and then we leaned into it. But right now, just doing that, just following that strategy and opening up, what Peak is doing, what King is doing, what Dream is doing, what Moon Active is doing, like just that isn't enough because you have to bring something new to the table to win at the user acquisition game. Because without it,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to get attention from the player because they're already playing a million games.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's still like super impressive, and that the fact that so many Turkish companies, or a handful, but still a very successful handful, have achieved this, taking something that looks mature and done, and then reinvigorating it with just not better graphics, but just better execution, more data driven, more focused. Like better playability, like all these things that are under the hood, and not plastered on top like an IP or
Yeah,
whatnot makes it even more impressive. It's just like that hard work of making a product better. So
yeah,
that's super impressive. I have three very easy questions towards the end.
sure.
So first one, what is Spike Games? What does it mean?
So I don't know if this is what it means to people, but it means to us is that increase, that sudden increase
Uh-huh.
and steady state, and seeing those
Yeah.
spikes, that like moments of like growth spurs, which is what we actually do. It's
Hmm.
just grind, 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 and then you see a window of opportunity as a sum, as a product of everything else you've done, and then once you see that opportunity, you don't blink and you just go through. That is what it means to us.
Got it. But it's misspelled, and also Spike is something that goes
On
up and
purpose. On
comes
purpose.
down.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay, could be hockey stick. That's another one.
Yeah. True. True.
That
True.
seems what Tile Blasters is doing. So that's All right, another easy question. How come you speak so good English? I mean,
Uh,
like you don't have any accent. Like you're an American lady, so.
yeah. So I went to an American high school in Istanbul,
Uh-huh.
and then I went to college in the States. I went to
Yeah.
Harvard, so I spent like 4 years there. So like since 10 years old, I've been speaking English. I've been
Mhm.
exposed to English, so probably that's why.
Yeah.
And it's like advantageous, like the world that we live in is
Yeah.
denominated in English, mostly in gaming.
Of course. Um, Third one and the last one. This is more like a more broader question. So this comes back to like taking off your Spike hat and putting on
Yeah.
your 500 Istanbul hat as a general partner of this
Yeah.
fund. Why do you think Turkish companies are doing so well, and what do you think is going to be like 5 years forward?
I think it's literally it's going to be maybe a cop out answer, but I truly believe that there is this thing called peak effect in the Turkish gaming landscape, right? There's this very famous visual where like the peak logo in the middle, and then like 65 companies that were spun out of it, and we're just one of them. Majority of which are gaming companies, but some are not. So if you probably give enough smart people enough time and enough resources to work on one single thing and be obsessive about it, they're going to be great. Like it's like the 1,000 hour
Hmm.
rule or
Hmm.
whatever. And this is like 10 times that or
Yeah.
100 times that
Yeah.
over a span of 10 to 15 years. So I think there is that inherent knowledge paired with Turkish people are hardworking people.
Hmm.
We're disciplined. We sometimes think this may be the only way out. We want to change the world with what we do and create better lives for ourselves, which is kind of the classic American dream, but the Turkish version of it. So
Yeah.
I
Turkish
think
dream.
that combined with now inbound interest from international like liquidity holders and VCs and whatnot. So if you give the resources to these people, they're gonna succeed. So I
Hmm.
think we're seeing the results of that finally.
What are the biggest challenges for companies coming out of Turkey?
Oh, obviously, I mean, building a startup is difficult everywhere, but
Hmm.
when you're dealing with geopolitical volatility on top of that, like everybody is already taking the product risk, and
Yeah.
we're also taking a country risk, like, stuff that we can't
Oh.
uh, like interfere with. So that like adds like another layer of complexity to your life. We always joke probably the level of volatility and bullshit that we experience in Turkey in a month's time is
Mhm.
probably 10 times what a person in Finland would experience in a lifetime. Is this running joke, which is the truth, I believe.
Yeah.
But that makes you more resilient, right? So
Yeah.
if you can like dodge those bullets here, and thrive and survive, then the business challenges that you run into are like you're like psh, like
Yeah, makes sense. Resiliency is
yeah.
incredibly important. I have like so I'll keep adding questions. Why? So because like looking more on the macro level, and since you have this
Mm.
experience, why is it so like why Turkish companies are not so keen on co-development or increasing their workforce outside Turkey? Like
Well,
mm,
I, I think
compared to
I think experience as a result of experience
uh-huh.
because that's what they've seen before. Like, so they
Mm,
see that one successful model of keeping everything in house, almost the information and the IP and everything like very protected,
mm-hmm,
like in Istanbul or in one centralized office is what they know, and nobody has tried anything else. And if
mm-hmm,
you kind of go outside of that boundary and try to co-develop or have remote offices or studios or service providers elsewhere, then you have to also start learning and practicing the art of
mm-hmm,
process management and
mm,
communication and adopting English as your language of choice and company. Which some of these are problems, right? So people like here in Turkey, people are good developers. They go in, they just
yeah,
finish it. They're hard workers, but very few plan ahead, right? Everybody's like trying to solve the problems as they come by. Like it's not like,
yeah,
okay, let's just go into it, do R&D, like, project management, product, like milestones. Very few people do that. And it would be the default state
yeah.
in what you described.
Yeah, I understand. We had Playrix here before. They're very homogenous as well. Uh, but in case of Playrix, their potential workforce is
Is much
bigger than
larger than ours.
than
Yes, true.
than how do Turkish companies see this? Like you're like Turkey is a big country. Was it 90
Yeah.
million?
Yes, close to 90 million, like
Yeah,
80,
it's
90
no
million.
joke. It's like way
Yeah.
bigger than France
Yes.
or Spain
And
or
young
Germany.
population too, right? So
Yeah,
much younger than
yeah,
European counterparts.
yeah,
So
yeah.
more people coming into the workforce than like Europeans. Now that this is like, this industry is providing so many
Hmm.
opportunities, not only gaming, but like tech in general, that a lot of the young people are like,
Hmm.
trying to get trained as engineers and analytical skills and or artistic skills as required. So
Yeah,
the wind is kind of like coming from our back. So it's this good thing, but obviously there isn't this existing as large of a pool as it is in Russia. So I
yeah,
do believe this is the main bottleneck for us. And I think the reason, because of that, we try to build really compact, really agile teams. Because if
yeah,
we build a work culture around needing like 600 people next year, then we're not going to find those 600 people based in Istanbul. So either we have to change the way that we work, or we're not going to get there. Otherwise, like, choose to do things differently. So at peak, for example, the day it exited, I think it had like 170 people, like two products doing billions in revenue per
hmm,
annum. So
yeah.
it was this very well-oiled machine run by a handful of people, if you think about it, like
Yes.
compared to like Kings and Playrix's. So this is a very different way of working. It's more inspired by Supercell, working in smaller teams and then having maybe wider teams like servicing the live ops and
Hmm.
growth and UA. But I think because of the talent shortage, we choose
Hmm.
to do that. And hopefully the talent shortage is going to be less of a problem as years go by because so many new people are coming into the industry.
Are the existing gaming companies like to my knowledge, you are not very friendly with each other. We're very competitive. But does that lead also to the fact that I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard through multiple years, through very many examples that should not be told in this podcast. But can you get do you invest back into schools, making sure that there's more talent, um, you know, coming in to the workforce that you could use, or
Yeah.
you kind of do you have time to give back, or are you just so focused on making this industry appealing and then through
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
attracting the talent?
So I think the first part of the question, I mean, I think the answer to that question is going to be different. To me, it feels a little bit too fraternal, like too close, almost. But I think maybe that is the peak mafia speaking,
Yeah.
or like the companies that we feel close with, that we don't harbor any negative feelings towards. And I know it's like a two-way street, and we try to be cordial with each other and share what possible, right? So, so it kind of depends. I mean, I guess if you're a newcomer to the industry and you don't have those
Yeah.
pre-established relationships of working together with these people, then maybe that is the case. But so that's my take on the initial part of the question. And the second part of the question, it's a huge aspect that not only us, but I think a lot of the other gaming companies of a certain scale try to do, not only for the good of the country or the industry or the ecosystem, but I think it's good business practice in establishing and building these relationships with technical schools or different faculties within universities of art schools and all of that, like early on, because it does kind of help into and feed into your recruiting strategies going forward. So we are very active. We have road shows with different like art schools to both like illustrators, 3D artists, animators, all of that. So we run portfolio days with them. So try to give back by sharing our best practices and also taking a look at their portfolios and to like mark people. Similar things we try to do with engineers and programs that we try to run with them. It is a huge part of our like HR or talent outlook.
Interesting. All right. So I think I promised 3 questions, and I think I did 7. But I'm just very interested. It's Turkish companies are very unique, incredibly successful. Your ways of working are very traditional, and there's no tips or tricks that can be shared. It's just hard work. You play against your own strengths. You have very clear weaknesses when it comes to especially talent by choosing a certain way, like being very homogenous, by working on site, by all these things that make you great are also the sort of a weaknesses. And there's a tremendous talent drain because the better your companies become, and as you speak so well in English, the more likely somebody from one of these bigger companies will come in with checks, and the better the country doing, the more likely they're not leaving. But the worse the country is doing, the more likely you might just go for a few years and work at Riot or whatnot. So that's kind of like my summary of what you've said. But nonetheless, incredibly impressive. I would say, every year I come to Istanbul, and I'm everybody who I bring in with me is like more and more impressed about the hotbed that is Istanbul, a city of 15 to 17 million people, beautiful, and people are just so hardworking, so smart, so diligent. So I can't say good enough things about all my Turkish colleagues that I've worked through over the years. So Rina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being so open about everything.
Thank you, Mishka. It was wonderful kind of catching up after a year. So it's been great. And
let's do this again.
Download Tilebusters.
Let's do this again in a couple of years. Again, when Tilebusters go crazy. Maybe I'll finally get you on the stage for our Istanbul event. So looking forward for that one as well.
All right, Mishka.
Thank you, Rina, and thank you everybody for listening. You can connect with Rina on LinkedIn or any other source where you can find her. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.